In this video I'm going to show you how I've rigged out my Canon R5 C to use it with a cinema lens. And the new thing that I got for that is the SmallRig MagicFIZ follow focus system. The basic kit comes with a follow focus motor, a hand wheel and a couple of accessories that allow you to get started quickly. I also got the focus handle, and then I put quite some effort into powering the camera, the monitor and the focus system with just one V-mount battery. I will show you how I did all of that. I can already say that SmallRig did a pretty good job with the MagicFIZ follow focus system, but to make that focus handle really awesome, I will quickly have to use my magic wand. The reason is that the USB-C port is at a quite uncomfortable position, and since I don't want to break the cable by accident, my hope was to use a dummy LP6 battery instead that I could plug into my main battery. However, there's no space for the cable to come out, and taking off the flap completely doesn't work either because the battery would not stay in the handle then. So to solve this, I first drilled a 3mm hole in the handle and then used that round file to create the needed slot. So no real magic here, I'm sorry, but now we have a focus handle with D-tap cable. I had rigged out the R5 C before, mainly because I needed a bigger battery for longer recording times. I also wanted a top handle, which often then requires you to have a cage and a base plate as well. You can check out my other R5 C rig video if you're interested in those things. But now let's take this apart and put it back together. A very essential part here is the SmallRig battery hinge with two rods, which I use to mount the battery behind the camera. There is a new similar product now, the compact V-mount battery mounting system that combines that flap with a V-mount and a base plate. However, the original one gives me a bit more flexibility, so I'm glad that they keep selling it. And I'm gonna use it with a V-mount battery plate, which has lots of mounting options on the back. Not enough though, as it will turn out. I think the intended way to attach this is either upright, like this, with screws through the big slot. I actually prefer mounting it sideways, which is also possible like this. What I also want to do is mounting a D-tap multiplier right below the battery, because I need to power 4 devices with it. And that is not so easy. I'm using the power splitter hub from Zitay, which has a screw in the middle, which I already took out. So we cannot mount this directly to the hinge because there's no hole for that. And besides that, the multiplier would block the hinge, which would then not fold down anymore. And that's the whole point of the hinge. So let's see what we can do. First, we need to extend our mounting options a bit, because right now we basically only have two positions where we could put the screws in. And I found this universal cheese plate from CAMVATE, which does exactly what I need here. I'll attach it to the hinge using 4/4 inch screws, which are 6mm long. I think the ones that come in the package are 9mm, but I had the short ones from other SmallRig products. You could also buy a screw set, which is always good to have. Okay, now that the cheese plate is in place, we're gonna take a look at this pretty new angled piece from SmallRig. I think it's not officially available yet, but still in the design stage. So check out the SmallRig website, it's called L-shape cheese plate. Now I'm gonna use a 1.5 cm long M5 screw and a washer, which I got at the hardware store, to mount the D-tap multiplier to the angled piece. On the other side, I'm using a corresponding nut and another washer. This is a bit fiddly to put together, but in the end, it should look like this. And then I'm gonna mount that whole thing to the bottom edge of the V-mount plate. For that, I'm using again 6mm long 1/4" screws. Longer screws would block the slot in the V-mount plate, so make sure to use the short ones. If we look at this from the side, we can see that the angled piece sticks out a bit on the back, and we cannot really mount it like that to the battery hinge. But this is one of the reasons why we added that cheese plate before. With that, the hinge reaches over the edge of the L shape. All we have to do is put 2 screws in. This time I'm using the long 9mm 1/4" screws. To get a bit more stability up here, I'll also add a little 7mm M5 screw. When all the screws are tight, the whole thing is very stable. And let's put the battery in to see how this looks. I really like this setup. Of course, there are power plates that do all of that, but they are expensive and heavy. This one, on the other hand, is as minimal as possible and does exactly what I need. I shortened the cable of the multiplier so that it reaches exactly to the output of the battery, but I think Zitay can also make those in a custom length right away, if you send them your requirements. Okay, now I'm gonna attach 2 rods which are 20 centimeters long. And the first thing that goes onto these rods is my self-made base plate. There are many options. Check out the other video that I already mentioned for a little overview. I use the SmallRig quick release plate, which I have screwed onto a SmallRig rod clamp using 2 screws. This is very minimal but effective. At the bottom, I'll attach an R5C plate so that I can mount the whole thing onto a tripod. So the next thing is the follow focus. I first bought the SmallRig mini follow focus, which can be mounted on the rods directly without any additional pieces. But by now I have the MagicFIZ system with this motor that also fits on the rod. The only problem here is that the wing nut of the motor sticks out to the bottom a lot and the rig doesn't stand very well on a flat surface. I already sent a suggestion to SmallRig for a rod extension piece that would solve this problem. So let's see if they will accept it. I will let you know. Anyway, let's proceed and mount the camera. I already have it in the SmallRig cage, and I also have the Canon hand strap, which does a pretty good job. And my lens is the Mikey 50mm t2.1 full frame prime lens. And I use the Mikey EF to RF adapter with drop-in ND filter. Since we don't have built-in ND filters in the R5 C, this is a very good compromise in my opinion, so much fun to use. The only problem is that you cannot get the filter out when the camera is in the cage. So you have to take the lens out first. So just keep that in mind. So I'll finally insert the camera into the rig. Making sure that it's centered. And once the camera is in, I can move the base plate a bit so that the camera sits as far back as possible. And here you can see the second reason why I added that cheese plate to the battery hinge. By that, the V-mount plate is shifted a bit to the right so that the red lever does not come against the viewfinder. Not that I'm using the viewfinder, but I don't want it to be damaged. Before I forget, I will put in the dummy battery. It's one from Alvin's cables for the R5 C with a custom cable length of 20 cm. It works pretty well, but doesn't support 8K 60 frames per second with autofocus. Since I'm pulling focus manually here anyway, this doesn't matter. You can check out my battery guide for the R5 C to learn more about the powering options. Okay, now we can adjust the focus motor so that it is connected to the focus ring of the lens. It's really important not to have too much tension here. It should turn very smoothly. I'm using the SmallRig mini mat box for the typical reasons, like there are no sun hoods for cinema lenses, and now there's even another reason for me to use it, and that is stability. I've noticed that pulling focus can introduce shakes in the footage when the lens moves, and for that reason I'm using the SmallRig 15mm LWS lens support that is compatible with my mat box. We then have to add this ring to the lens and when that is in place, we can put the mat box on the lens and the rods. And with this, the lens sits very tight at the front and the back, so we can be sure that there will be no jitters coming from pulling focus. The next thing is the focus handle. And this one is the reason why I got the motorized follow focus in the first place, because I wanted it to be a bit more comfortable to pull focus while holding the camera. As I showed in the beginning, my dummy battery is already inside, so First we have to screw in the included NATO clamp. And I will make sure that this is really tight, because this part will carry quite some weight. In order to connect this to the camera, I got this NATO rail with ARRI locating screw. And this one can be mounted on the side of the cage. Some other camera cages have built-in NATO rails on the side, but this one doesn't, so we need this extra piece. And now this looks pretty good. I'll plug in the cable in the multiplier. And then we need the top handle. I got this one from NEEWER because it is pretty minimal and only around 7 centimeters high. And the ARRI version, which I have, can be screwed directly onto the cage. For the monitor, I got this swivel and tilt monitor mount with NATO clamp and ARRI pins. I got this custom made because they seem not to sell these anymore, or never really have. But they have similar mounts with different combinations of top and bottom part, and I just asked SmallRig if they could make me the one that I needed. And they did. The mount goes to the front of the handle. And here comes the monitor. You can see that I have put a NATO rail there, which I keep there all the time, so that it's easier for me to take the monitor on and off. Before I put the cables in, I really want to recommend this cable clamp that is included with the R5 C. I ignored it for a long time and it cost me at least one HDMI cable, so better put this in. The power cable is from Alvin's cables and 30 centimeters long, and the HDMI cable is from SmallRig. To keep the cables organized, I use little pieces of Velcro. My battery is from Moman, a very basic and small V-mount battery. I can highly recommend it. It has 2 D-tap outputs and 2 USB-A outputs. And since I mounted on the back of the rig, it counterweights the lens pretty well. Okay, the last thing is the power supply for the focus motor. I'm using a D-tap to USB-C cable from Alvin's cables that they made for me with 11 cm cable length on the D-tap side and 30 cm on the USB-C side. And I asked them to use an angled USB-C plug. All of that was no problem. SmallRig has a similar cable, but not with these exact lengths, so I'm really happy how well everything fits with this one. And okay, this is the final rig. I think it's pretty awesome. The only annoying thing is that the motor and the handle don't power up automatically when I plug in the battery. I always have to press these two buttons for a couple of seconds. But other than that, the focus performance is super. I like the handle a lot. The knob could be a bit easier to turn for my taste, but it gets actually easier with the time. I also have the hand wheel controller, which I use when I have the camera on a tripod and when I don't want to touch it physically. So it's really good that this can also work wirelessly. However, keep in mind that the positions on the wheels are absolute. And if you're going from one wheel to the other one and turn it, then the motor might make a quick rotation to catch up to the position of the new wheel. So I think it would have been better if these controllers were endless and each rotation was just a relative change. But they decided to do it like this, and yeah, it works pretty well. So I'm totally happy with that. If you're interested in rigging the R5C, make sure to check out my other videos. I hope I'll see you in the next one.